Our story about convolutional neural network wouldn't have been complete without um, the few extra topics that I'm going to cover right now. And let's start with one of them. Did you know that there is something called masked convolution? So, convolutions work like that. Remember when we looked at one-dimensional case? Imagine that. Well, let me do just a little bit. Imagine we have our input right here. This is my image, but the way it's inputted is by pixels, and there are the nodes, intersection nodes of this grid. This is one-dimensional example. My neuron at this level will see just 3 pixels. But then, so this is layer 1, but then the neuron at this level, or at layer 2, will see those 3 pixels, and by proxy, it'll see all 5 down beneath. What if we want to mask some pixels out? For example, our goal is to mask out in the receptive field below for this neuron in layer 2, or for blah 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 for that neuron in layer I. We want to mask out in a 2D case. Well, let's just stick to 1D for now. We just wanted to see half of the input and not to see the other half. The way we could do it is take the input, this is our image, and apply a mask to the receptive field of the filter. That is, for the pixels that we want to pass through, that we want the neuron to see something, we have value of 1, and for those that we want to eliminate from consideration, we have value of 0. Sounds like a good idea, but wait, it's kind of confusing. Of multiple pixels, those are the input pixels. We want to mask out 2/3 of the view, and let's denote active connection, active weights by white color, and let's denote by red those that are not participating. So we're masking out 2/3 of the field of view for this neuron. How do we mask 2/3 of the field of view for this neuron? Well, we just apply the same mask to all the neurons that contribute to the field of view of the top neuron. How does that look? Visible, visible, invisible, masked out. Well, this whole neuron is masked out, so everything it sees doesn't matter, or because it doesn't contribute to the top neuron. But the mask is also applied to this neuron. So compare the expected field of view of this neuron and the masked out field of view of the same neuron. So as you see, by applying mask, passes, not passes, to each neuron in among those that contribute to the neuron in the top layer and form the field of view down to the image. By applying the same mask at all levels, we achieve the effect that our field of view of the top layer neuron is masked out appropriately, um, as we wanted. And then if we add another neuron right here and use the same mask as before, we will have achieved exactly the same effect that this neuron down there where it's supposed to have field of view will have 2/3 of the field of view masked out. You can imagine that exactly the same process generalizes to two-dimensional case. Okay, if we have field of view in 2 dimensions and we want to only see this part of the image, or for the top neuron when the image is the field of view, or when the field of view of the top neuron is the whole image, the complete image, entire image, and we only want that neuron to see this part and to have no idea about what's going on here, we can do the same. We can take this mask and apply it to the weights of a two-dimensional convolutional neuron. Why would that be useful, you may ask? Well, it turns out to be extremely useful in something called pixel CNNs. In pixel CNNs, we have an interesting problem, an interesting idea. And the idea is the following. Let's take our image and enumerate all of our pixels from left to right, and then from top to bottom. Right? We go from here, then continue here, then continue here, and enumerate all of the pixels. And now the goal is to generate an image pixel by pixel. Kind of weird idea, right? Why would you generate anything pixel by pixel? But we will generate it in an autoregressive manner by sampling from a distribution. So we want to generate pixel I from a conditional probability distribution of pixel I conditioned on all i's that are less than this particular I, or all i's that are less than this I, all i's that went before. See where the mask can be used, the mask convolutions, because we don't want a network to see further where it predicts this pixel. How it is done in pixel CNN, and especially in conditioned pixel CNN, you're practically starting with one pixel in the image and you're trying to generate the next. So you apply this mask to each convolutional filter when the top neuron sees the whole image, but it's empty because it's 0 and only one pixel contributes. The output of PixelNet and of convolutional PixelNet is a distribution. That's also a new concept, but I'm not going to go into details. So it has two output positions. One gives you, say, mu, the mean, and another gives you the variance. But we actually work with scale because the variance could have arbitrary numbers that are hard to handle. So when we generate from this one pixel, we generate mu, and sigma for the next pixel. We're sample from this distribution. Fill that pixel and go to the next and repeat the process. We apply the mask convolution with a new mask now when only those two pixels are seen by the network. And eventually, pixel by pixel, going back and forth, propagate forward, make a prediction, sample, fill the value. Eventually, we cover the whole image with generated image conditioned on the initial value. When that could be useful, I don't have an example, but you can have I don't have an example figure now. But basically, you can recover the occluded parts of the image with pixel CNN. But the value of pixel CNNs was in sheer surprise that you can generate whole image a pixel at a time, and the image that you get is quite meaningful. That was unexpected. But then thinking about it, people from DeepMind at Google turned to the audio, and audio actually is never thought about it as something generated or even analyzed sample by sample. Look at this animated example. Audio is usually at 16 kilohertz, that is 16,000 samples per second or more. If we generate this sample by sample, why would we do that? Usually it's generated by concatenative or parametric models, when you just take phonemes and concatenate them together to create a speech. This is, by the way, interesting. When you start generating audio, you can generate speech, and that was the original motivation for the WaveNet, which is also a convolutional network of the pixel CNN type. This is how it works. Based on the previous input, it convolved it in a sliding window manner, like a convolution, pixel by pixel, or sample by sample in this case. WaveNet generates an audio waveform. Let's see why, or why would that be interesting. And one of the approaches is parametric, when we're parametrizing the waveform and to generate interesting phonemes. Another is concatenative, when we concatenate phonemes together. Another one is WaveNet, which I just introduced. Let's listen to how they sound.
The Blue Lagoon is a 1980 American romance and adventure film directed by Randall Kleiser.
Not bad.
The Blue Lagoon is a 1980 American romance and adventure film directed by Randall Kleiser.
Those are real phonemes stitched together, and see what WaveNet does.
The Blue Lagoon is a 1980 American romance and adventure film directed by Randall Kleiser.
That is really good. What about a different phrase?
Aspects of the Sublime in English Poetry and Painting, 1770 to 1850.
This is actually not bad.
Aspects of the Sublime in English Poetry and Painting, 1770 to 1850.
Okay, and WaveNet?
Aspects of the Sublime in English Poetry and Painting, 1770 to 1850.
So what was surprising about WaveNet was generation sample by sample. The network learned to imitate the sounds that I'm making when I'm talking right now, like when my lips stick together, or when I inhale, and stuff like that, that is not sufficient or not required for speech, for understanding. And all of that is conditioned on actual text that was said. Interestingly, when the network is not conditioned on any meaningful text, or not conditioned on text at all, it still generates the waveform of the sound, but here's how it sounds.
Er even dogus is his lot of the cadence of timing, building a good jiffy riff. Tar the nota they that clear on.
This is not language. This is just gibberish generated by this model. Fun, right? Worth listening over and over again. So, if you thought that's all, oh no, we have more interesting developments that happened in the field fairly recently. Remember, convolutions, shift invariant. When you have a property that there is a car somewhere, or there is an eye, or there is something that just shifts the location, you can use convolutional neural networks to find them, those parts, by scanning through the image left, right, up, and down. But if the feature is rotated, and if the feature is of interesting shape, for example, you're looking for a 1, and you're convolving this with an image where there is a 1 somewhere, but then what if this 1 is rotated 45 degrees? Then there will be always low correlation between these two, and this filter, which is autocorrect, will never find the rotated 1. So what the authors of this paper, Deformable Convolutions, suggested that why do we have to stick to the regular grid? Why don't we run a parallel network together with the convolutional network that learns deformations or offsets for each of the neurons in the receptive field, for each of the inputs in the receptive field, so it can learn some chaotic and it can learn, and at each shift it can guide the network which offsets to add depending on what was regular input to the network. This is a regular convolutional network that dictates the deformable convolutional network, which offsets to take. And once this happened, we can model stretches. So if we learned to look for an eye in the image, but there is an eye in the image that is just not the same shape, this particular filter in regular convolutional neural network in this kind won't find this eye. But in the deformable convolutional neural network, we can stretch the filter and still detect it at the right place and time when we are going over that eye, this decision maker. Very similar to gates, by the way. Don't you find that funny? But we can also learn rotation. If we have an eye here, this control network can turn our filters sideways and rotate around the center. This is amazing, right? The results are amazing as well. We see 3 different neurons trained to recognize something, or recognizing something specific. I guess this one is recognizing either the scenery or just the sky. This one is recognizing red car, and this one recognizing the blue car. So that's where the control network decided to put all of the samples of the filter. So take home points is masked convolution. Very interesting, very simple, and I hope it's a little bit surprising or amusing to you that by masking local field of views, we can mask the field of view of a neuron that is somewhere at the end of the deep network that sees the whole image, but the mask will be very similar as the local mask. Then pixel-based generation. We can generate signals, sounds, and images pixel by pixel, literally, which is mind-blowing when this work first appeared. And then deformable convolutions. Deformable convolutions, they're not even implemented in TensorFlow yet, even though it's not that recent paper, 2017. It was put on archive. But deformable convolutions also kind of transgress the borders of convolutional neural network, because now it's a much more powerful and much more interesting, complicated model that can handle rotations, scale, and even more interesting situation. With this part, we conclude our exposition of convolutional neural network. I hope you've enjoyed it.